basically 4, almost 5 now years ago, I came across Glide. The tagline was build an app from a spreadsheet, or something like that. I do know how spreadsheets work. I do know how like lookups and relations between different tables work. I think I can do this. And that's how we got started. Nowadays, we're a team of 27 so far. We've done over 300 apps.
Oh, hey, everybody. It's Brett from Glide here. So glad y'all are here with this event. I'm super excited. We're going to be sitting down with Jesus from LowCode Agency, and we're going to be talking all about how he shipped 300 apps in just a few years. How did he do that? So we're going to be taking a deeper dive. I'm really excited. So I'm going to invite up to the stage Jesus. Jesus, my friend, welcome. Super glad to have you. So I for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about what is LowCode. What is the LowCode Agency?
Sure. So LowCode, we are a software development firm. We build apps and I would say tech tools for mainly businesses and entrepreneurs. We help either businesses that are growing very fast to build solutions to help them streamline their business, be more efficient, make more money. And we also help at the same time like entrepreneurs and founders build their first tech product to go to market basically.
So for those who are joining us, we're going to jump in and do a few things. So Jesus, I want to ask you some background things, how you got started, what your journey developing this agency was like. Then I want to jump a little, then go into the secret sauce, which is clearly your processes and your operations. And I think there's going to be so much meat there for everybody tuning in. And also kind of talk about how you are structuring yourself in the future and your experience with Glide. And any questions that the viewers have that are tuned in, if you just want to drop them in the Q&A section, I'll get to them at the end. But keep this chat going. It's so good to see people from Singapore, Barcelona, and even in Denver. This is great. So whatever you say, I might throw it at Jesus in the middle of it. So just drop your comments. So let's get into this. Custom software and business processes and a lot of the things that you build for businesses is sometimes kind of complicated to convey really quickly. What would you say if you were in an elevator with a business owner that you could help them solve a problem? What would be your elevator pitch?
So I'll pull up my screen quickly. Can you see that?
Yes.
All right, cool. So I'll go here, and then you can see here our mission is to revolutionize the way businesses and entrepreneurs approach software development by making tailor-made, easy-to-use, scalable software through the use of no-code tools. So that's the elevator pitch. We bring technology to people, to businesses, and it's easy to use, it's scalable, it grows with your business, it evolves with your business, because I think that's a big challenge, that growing businesses are always evolving and they need more and more and more in terms of technology, and these no-code and low-code tools scale very well with these type of businesses.
Is that all you offer? What else do you offer your clients? Is it just software? I mean, what suite of services do you offer?
So basically, these are like the 4 pillars that we offer our clients. Apps for businesses, that's like our biggest type of product. And we call it AI apps. But at the end, basically every single project that we made in the last couple of years has some AI component leveraging Glide AI or some other like third-party service provider. We've built a lot of MVPs as well, like marketplaces, SaaS, etc. And then we have a little part of the business at LowCode where we do web design, basically Webflow development.
Is there a specific type of business or ideal customer that you're really targeting? Like, do you have that kind of persona in mind?
We do have specific customer personas or ideal customer profiles, but we have several of them, right? Because it's different, like the type of needs that a large business has or a medium-sized business has. Let me pull up something like this, where you can see here at the bottom, the different logos of our clients: Zapier, American Express, Coca-Cola, Margaritaville, right? So even though we have these very, very large, like Fortune 500 businesses, at the same time, we also target, let's say, 50 to a couple hundred, 50 to maybe even 1,000 employees, businesses, right, that have very specific needs. The challenge with business apps specifically is that when a business is looking for a custom-made solution, that means that there isn't enough off-the-shelf software that is achieving what they need, doing what they need, right? And that's because the need is so specific, so niche, that it's hard to replicate that with the next business that comes, right? So I would say that one of our ideal client personas or profiles is like business owners, business managers that are thinking about how to make their business more efficient, how to aggregate data to see all in one dashboard. So that's like a very clear user persona. And then a different one would be the MVP type of product, which is usually a founder, an entrepreneur thinking of an idea, trying to bring something to the market and going from 0 to 1.
So what made you, I want to ask you a couple more questions and I want to jump into your secret sauce here. When did you decide to like jumpstart this agency? When did the idea of low code pop in your head?
So basically that started when I came across Glide. I've always been involved in software development and technology, and I'm not a software engineer. I always regretted not being a software engineer because I couldn't build my own things, right? And then basically 4, almost 5 now years ago, I came across Glide. The tagline was build an app from a spreadsheet for free or something like that, right? And I was like, I do know how spreadsheets work. I do know how like lookups and relations between different tables work. I think I can do this. Then I jumped in, I spent a day building a couple apps, and I was like, I really like this. I've always wanted to be in this type of business, so I'm gonna build a business around this product, back then Glide. And that's how we got started. So right from the beginning, I knew that I wanted to build a business. I didn't want to be a freelancer. I didn't want this to be my side job. It was for a time, right? And eventually, but always the goal was, let's make a business out of this thing. And then that's how we started. Nowadays, we not only building Glide, we build with different platforms. We're a team of 27 so far. We've done over 300 apps.
That's really incredible. Did you have any sort of agency experience or experience inside an agency before starting low code?
No, I had tried with a friend, with a co-founder, a previous business, and we were basically building a vertical software line, but it failed. It was like traditional software development. It didn't work out. So I had the idea. I knew how to implement software at businesses because at my previous jobs, I had done that a couple times, like being the person in charge of implementing an ERP, a CRM, etc. So I knew from like today, my customer's perspective, what did that look like? But I hadn't any experience like working for an agency.
That's really insane growth over 4 years. That's incredible. So how did you, I'll ask you just maybe one more question, then let's get into the operations and the processes that you've clearly defined to get to this level of growth. How did you land your first clients? How did you kind of get the initial business?
So first clients, as usual, family and friends. The next clients, I was very involved. Back then, the Glide community was very small. It was like 20 people on the community forum, and I answered every single post, right? Nowadays, you don't see me anymore in the community. We have Finn there, which is part of our team, very engaged in the community. But back then, I answered every single comment, every single post. And a lot of things I didn't know, but that's how I learned Glide. Right? So I was like, I'm going to become an expert. I'm going to answer every single post, every single question. So I came up in the morning, answered every single blog post, noon, at night. So I was like the most involved person back then. And people started seeing me on the forum. The Glide team started seeing me everywhere. And then I probably got a couple of clients from the community forum back then. And then the Glide team, they were like, hey, we have this customer. They need help. They don't want to build the app themselves. So they basically passed that to me. And then basically I've always been in sales my whole life. So I've been selling from day 0 up until today.
That's so awesome. And to see that level of growth and even as with our experts at large here at Glide, it's amazing to see how much traction, how much has grown just in the short year, a little over a year that I've been here, to see you and so many others accelerate. But this is fantastic. So let's jump a little bit. I'm going to ask you to do something a little different here. We all know that there are processes and things, but I want to talk to you about what you call the low code way. And we've had conversations about this before, but what I would love to see, and what I think would be really interesting for everybody watching, is what does your client sort of experience when you engage with them, when you from a scoping call to onboarding to different levels of different milestones of software development? What's their experience? That's what I would love to see. And I think that would be really interesting. Would everybody like to see that? I think that would be really cool.
Sure. So yeah, I think that's something, it has been a process in terms of how we engage with our clients, what they need, how do we communicate with them. And it has been a process of years. And now we have like a very clean, very refined process in terms of how we build, how we communicate with our clients. Because at the end, we have multiple people on the team and multiple project managers. And ideally, we communicate in a very specific way, which is here the low-code way, right? So after building 300 projects, we know how to build software. We know how to build like tech solutions. So basically, I'm going to go up because this is like when we actually start working with them. But the first step is the discovery process. So we spend time with our prospective customers, with our leads, understanding their needs, right? I think one of the advantages that we have at LowCode is that we are not married to a specific platform. So depending on what our customer needs, we can decide which platform is the best for their needs, because not every idea fits the same platform, right? So they're like, this is my challenge, this is my problem, this is where I'm losing money, this is where I need to save more time, right? So we have this process, this discovery process of speaking with our client, and sometimes multiple times their team members as well. So we do like interviews internally with different users at the company to understand how they work. Like, what does the process look like today? What is the way they do things? In many cases, they're living in spreadsheets, they're living in paper, right? So right from the beginning, you get the idea of what they need. Like if we just go from paper to software, like it's a big jump in terms of ROI, because I'll go back a couple slides here that I want to show you this. Business software, like we've done hundreds, like probably a couple hundred apps that we've made are for businesses. Average return on investment is 2.8 months, right? So it's massive, the jump that these businesses do from not using custom software to using custom software, because either they're using Excel, paper, etc., or they're using 3 or 4 different off-the-shelf softwares and they have to end up copy pasting data from one to the other one, and they're losing data. They don't have one place where they have everything together. So the value add of this is very powerful. So they have like savings, they have a lot of reduction in errors, they have a more streamlined business, right? So during this process, we will do some discovery, and then we end up with a clear scope of work in terms of what we will build for our clients. Something that we always discuss with our clients, and something that we've been working on a lot recently this year, is just like clients are interviewing us to see if we're a good fit as an agency, as a partner, as a service provider, we are also interviewing our customers, because we don't want to work with customers who don't believe in our process, right? We won't be a good fit because we do things in a very specific way. We have like a Kanban board, a task board with a bunch of tasks. So we're working in such a specific way that people who don't want to do that won't have a great experience, right? So we'll do the discovery process, we'll have a scope of work, and we'll be like, okay, this is what we both think, our client and us, that is version 1. This will provide enough value for you to sell the project internally, have your team members, employees, whatever, have like these buy-in to the product, because not only you need to build a software as a business, but you need your people to use it and to fully become part of that thing. So this is version 1, and these will be like future releases. We'll have them documented, not thoroughly, but at least we know, and they know what comes next, right? Because it's a roadmap. Software is like children. They always want more. They always keep evolving, changing, needing different things. So it's not like I get my app, we forget about low-code or my service provider, my developer, right? Because actually growing businesses need more. So we have this project set up. So for example, something important, who will be the decision maker at our client, right? We want one person to do that. There might be multiple parties involved, multiple departments sometimes, but we want a decision maker, right? Then we have the scope refinement. So here, on the scope of work, we have like a high-level idea, semi-high level idea of what needs to be done, features, screens, functionalities, user roles. But then on the scope refinement, something as simple as if you're thinking about adding a vendor to your system, what goes on that form, right? What fields go on that form? Obviously, like a company name, company address. Maybe the contact goes there, but maybe not, because maybe you have like another table, which is contacts for your vendors or contacts for your customers, right? So we start thinking about all of these steps and documenting them for the client. And then at the end of this scope refinement stage, we give our client a data sheet, like an Excel or a Google Sheet spreadsheet with everything that they have to fill in. So that's the refinement stage, the first basically 1 or 2 weeks. And then we have the design stage. We begin the design stage as soon as the scoping stage. Because for example, in that form, like we have to think about like the hierarchy. What goes at the top of the form? What's the most important field? Which fields are required? Which fields are a drop-down versus a choice component? Is a choice component a drop-down or appeals or whatever, right? So we have to think of so many things. And then, so the design stage is led by our UX designers. We have 3 on the team. So basically, each project is being managed by a project manager. They have a designer with them, and then they have a developer or a development team, and then the QA team. I'll go into more detail a little bit later.
Let's take one quick step back. There's a couple things you said that I really want to. Let's go back to the yes. There's a couple things you said here that I think is absolute gems for people who aren't quite at your automation process operational stage. What you said here is in the refinement is that you want one decision maker for your client. I think this is really big. Why? And I can tell that this is something that you've done because of probably past problems and burn and everything else. Explain for people why it's so critical that this framework right here, the way you've structured it to move forward, and why is it important to only have one main point of contact for your client?
There are multiple reasons. One is that you want someone who, so here on the second step, we will assign responsibilities to everyone involved in the project with due dates, right? So you want one person on the other side of the street, like your client, with due dates. He's responsible, or she, whatever. They are responsible for a bunch of things that need to happen internally. They need to collect data internally. They need to collect information. They need to do a bunch of things. If you have multiple people, then it won't work. Then you get to the worst thing that can happen to any software development agency, which is scope creep. Things don't move, right? So you have the resources working on the project. On the other side, your client is dragging their feet, or there's a specific person that doesn't want the project because maybe they think that their job will get replaced by the software, or we're implementing AI and they whatever, right? So you need someone who's your buyer, right, on the other side, and not specifically the person signing the check, but you need like someone on the other side who manages the project. And this is more important even at larger companies. At smaller companies, you're either speaking with a business owner, with a manager, high-level manager, but at larger companies, you need someone on the other end making sure that the deadlines are like, when we need something, it gets done. When we need a decision made, it's one person who makes that decision, and that's final, and then we move forward.
Do you still utilize the one primary person contact, even if there are multiple stakeholders? And how do you manage multiple important stakeholders?
So basically, that is something that we do during discovery, like understanding what they need and the different roles. But at the end, business software works for the business. It doesn't work for a specific department. It doesn't work for a specific person. Each person might have different needs, and they obviously have different priorities, but the business needs something. And as our client, as the business owner, you need to think of your business. Like, what does the business need now? So on our end, on our side, we're like, okay, this is what the business needs. I understand that there are multiple stakeholders on the business and involved in the project, but at the end, you need one decision maker. Otherwise, I can assure you, not only because of what we've experienced, but having spoken with dozens of other agency owners, when you have multiple stakeholders on the other end and there's not one person responsible of making decisions, then things don't happen. Or worst case scenario, what happens if one person tells you X and the next one tells you Y? What do? They're conflicting ideas, and then like, who's responsible of deciding which one? You don't want to be responsible for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I thought this would be a good little side quest detour to ask you, because it's really, I think this framework is great, but why you built it is and built and constructed it this way. I think there's a lot of learnings. Okay, I didn't mean to. So we've talked about refinement. Now let's jump into design. We've got our stakeholders. We've got our point person. We're building.
And then here you can see at the top, like we have like a user flow, right? So thinking about user flows is very important. And we have seen so many apps that have been already built, either in Glide or a different tech stack, that nobody has spent time thinking about the user flow. How does the user interact with the system? What do they do when they see the homepage of the app? Like, is there a list? Is there a dashboard? Are there analytics? Did they see their notifications? So this is where the UX design is really important, because Glide has, specifically with Glide, the UI design, I'll get into that a little bit later, the UI design is not as time-consuming as building with other platforms, right? We have a lot of off-the-shelf components in Glide that we can use. So when you're thinking about a list, when you're thinking about a Kanban board, like Glide already has those components, so we don't have to build them from scratch. However, the UX part is extremely important, because if the UX is clunky, then the end users won't use the app. It'll be complicated for them to use the app, right? Nowadays, all of the apps that you have on your phone are multi-million-dollar companies that have spent a lot of time thinking about the UX and the UI, right? Glide has spent, if not millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars thinking about the UI. So the only thing that you got to think as a Glide builder, as a Glide developer, is the UX. So what does the user experience look like? What happens when the user clicks here? What happens when you have different roles and then different people should do different things within the same screen, right? So this is very important. The UX design is very important. I remember, and I'll give you an example, many years ago, probably 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, right at the beginning, we had a client, a very technical client, and we were building for them something in Glide. It was a great project. They scaled, they raised money, etc. So we were building something for them. And back then, the process was, I sat with them, I did discovery, I did scoping, and then we had Thin back then, and then our senior Glide developer building, right? So I was like, cool, I understand what you're trying to do, what you want. I understand what the output should look like. What is the input? I'll come back in 3 days, 4 days, whatever week, and then we'll have the app ready. And then I sat down with Thin, we figured it out, we built the app. A week later, we sat down with the client. I was like, okay, here's the result. And I was like, you did a good job in terms of the outcome. That was the outcome that I expected, but the process wasn't the way I expected it to work, right? Because we're dealing with nurses and nurses work in this way. So that was like very eye-opening to me, because we were like, okay, when you're building like very simple MVPs, very simple apps, it doesn't matter. Like what happens in the middle doesn't matter. But when you're building apps that are going to be used, like we have clients that their employees spend 8 hours a day sitting in front of a Glide app, right? So UX matters and the process matters. So this is like a very critical part of app development. I've seen too many apps that are built in Glide, so they work, but have a terrible UX design and nobody understands where to click, what to do next. Like you have too many CT calls to action, too many buttons. So anyway, this is something important. With other platforms, not Glide, we do have to think a lot of in terms of the UI. And that is one thing that makes development more expensive and more time consuming, right? With Glide, Glide has beautiful components out of the box, a lot of good ones, a bunch of new ones that probably some people have seen, some people haven't, that are really, really, really crazy, great, fantastic. So Glide gives you the UIs and Glide gives you the responsiveness, which are two things that when we're building in a different platform takes so much time, right? So the UI design is important. In Glide, it's, I would say, not a big deal. Glide has figured that out for you. You don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about that. And then we jump into development, right? So the stages are scope refinement, design. The client will go over the wireframes, the user flows, make sure that everything works. This is actually like a low fidelity wireframe of an app with notes. With when you click on this card, you go to the screen. When you click on whatever, you go here. When you delete these photos, something happens on the back end. So we're documenting our wireframes extremely. We're spending a lot of time wireframing our projects. And then we walk the client through this low fidelity wireframe to make sure that it looks as they expect. Information hierarchy is the right one. The forms have the right fields. So we know exactly how the app will work, how it will look, how it will function. And then the development stage. So the development stage is development, right? The developer starts working on the app, or developers, and then they build the app. They spend a week or a couple of weeks or whatever. And then, so there's not a lot going on here. And then we have the QA step. So this is something critical for larger apps as well. Again, if you're building an MVP that has a couple of screens, a couple of roles, it's not as relevant as we have a Glide app that has 7 different user roles, and it's a workflow. So user A starts something, then needs approval from user B, then they do something, and then the third user does something related to the second one. The thing goes back to the other user. So very complicated workflows, right? And when you have that complexity of workflows, and when you're implementing software for a business that is already working, that already has a process, the QA part is very important, right? So we have a QA team, we have a person that his only job is doing QA, as well as internal QA. So here, the developer will do QA on their work, the project manager will do QA on the app, the QA person will do QA, everything is tested, everything is tracked. We have our comment board here, so you can see the different milestones, all of them go through QA, eventually the QA is approved, and then we have the client testing phase.
How long does a typical QA last for y'all?
Depends on the size of the app, can go from a couple days to a week. I mean, we have some very large apps that have gone through like a couple of weeks of QA. And that's usually like QA, both internal and external. So both internal QA and client testing.
Yeah.
Because when you have something, so I'll give you an example. Let's say that we're building an app for a client that, actually I saw someone on the chat earlier today that connects to QuickBooks, right? That is like a very complex setup. Each company's QuickBooks is different. QuickBooks is a very complicated system to integrate. Each business runs their own thing in a different way. So someone does like the invoicing in QuickBooks, someone does the invoicing outside and just sends the information to QuickBooks. So something like that needs client testing. We can do internal QA, but there are a lot of things that we'll miss, that won't happen, integrations that won't get synced if we don't have like client testing. So this phase is extremely important, right? Because here we're actually using the app with real data and with real users. So if we, on this stage, by this stage, the development is done, internal QA is done, we'll have a call with the client, we'll show them the app, we'll show them the different user roles, create users for each user role, and give them access. We're like, okay, here's the app, test it. In our portal, in our project manager tool, you'll document every QA issue. And this is the format. Who's the user? Where did it happen? What happened? What should have happened? So on the opportunities tab, when I clicked on on the opportunities tab, user role A, when they click on the participating button here, we saw X, and in reality, according to the wireframes and the scope, we should be seeing Z, right? So there's a format in terms of how clients should document their feedback / bugs, right? Because if it's something that should work in a certain way and it's not, clearly it's a bug, and we're responsible for that, and we need to fix that. But at the same time, the client might be like, oh, when I click on the past tab, it shows like this, but what if we showed it in a different way? That's a different thing. That's a change order. That's something that's not related to QA or the original scope of work and the wireframes. It's something that now that they're using the app, they might think that the app might be better if it works in a different way, right? So at this moment, the project manager does a very complicated job of figuring out which tasks, which tickets from the client are actually QA issues that need to get fixed, because that's our job, and which tickets are change orders or additional features that will create a ticket for them, you'll see them later, and then later on we'll come back to them. What we want at this stage is version 1 should be done, ready, and approved and delivered and used by the client before we get into additional development.
So to sort of summarize this, you teach your client how to effectively communicate with something that they see that they want changed. Then your project managers determine whether or not that's a QA issue or a change, meaning the software needs to be tweaked in a different way. And that's really interesting. That's such a finesse point right there to make everything just flow, your team flow, the client flow. That's a secret sauce, I would say, right there.
Yeah, it's very important, and that's the only way that we have been able to grow, right? Because when we have the scope of work, the wireframes, and then the actual app, it's quite easy to see if what the client is saying is a change order, is an additional feature or not, right? If it's on the wireframe, if it's on the scope, then clearly the developer missed that and the QA team missed that. But if it's a thing that's not there, then it's a change order, and it's very easy for us to explain. And hopefully the client understands it as well, that, yeah, I mean, this is not the scope, this is not the wireframe, this is something that we can get to this later. And later can be next day, as soon as version 1 is ready and paid, or later can be later, right? Because especially, I mean, with business apps, it's a little bit different because it might be like a business requirement. So they'll be like, hey, this is what we agreed. Everybody, we all missed this, and we need this new feature that's not part of the original scope in order to put the app in production. When you're talking about more like an MVP, we have had hundreds of cases where people are like, oh, like this is like the most important feature for my app. We're like, it's not in scope. We'll document it here. You can pay for it if you want to. But why don't you actually go out and test the app? And also happens sometimes with business apps. Why don't you go out and deploy this app with your employees, with your users, get some feedback, have them use the app for whatever, a couple of weeks, a month, etc. And then we sit down and see what your priorities are. 90% of the cases, their priorities changed. What they thought was like the most critical part of the thing, right, is no longer in their heads, because actually there are new things that are way more important. Or when talking more about MVPs, like B2C apps, there are actual features that clients are willing to pay for that are not what you thought would be. Right. So it's always MVP. Like I'm telling, like that's probably the most used word in my vocabulary. MVP, version 1. Let's get this done. Let's get this launched, and then you launch, and then we sit back, and then we do like a second iteration, a second version. So after client testing, we start thinking about iterating future plans. Right. That gets documented as well. Eventually, with just a click, especially in Glide, with just a click, we launch the app. That's a click. We deploy it under a subdomain, on Glide's domain, whatever. They start using it. And then this is like a very critical part. And it's something that we have spent a lot of time working on, which is the scale and growth stage, right? So the seventh phase, the last phase, which is scale and growth. So you can see here on my Kanban board, we have like different tasks categorized and then prioritize as well. So we're using the star system. So the client can come in and be like, okay, this is 5 stars, this is a priority. And all of this is additional, like out of scope of the original project, right? So we have a couple of different options with some clients, ideally, and usually business clients. We put them on a retainer and we give them X amount of hours of development hours a month, 8, 20, 40, etc., depending on their needs, right? And basically have a call with them, depending on how many hours they buy from us, what package they buy from us. So we sit down with them every month, every couple of weeks, every week to go over their needs, what needs to be done. We scope in detail every task, document them, have them approve it, and then we move forward. And the development team works in that, the QA team works in that, and the client tests, approves, we deploy it live. Sometimes also clients don't want to do that. So they're like, okay, document everything that you want here on your features column on the task board. And then a few weeks later, a couple of months later, we sit down, we go over all of these things, and we do like a second sprint, version 2, and then eventually version 3 and version 4, right? So we do like a versioning process instead of like a continuous process. So both are options. Some clients prefer one over the other. Both are fine, right? At the end, I'm like, I always tell our clients, don't spend more money on development. Like, especially if you're launching a product like to the market, spend money on customer acquisition. Don't spend on development. So MVP, and even in business apps, like get your app done, launch, speak with your users, speak with your employees. What do they actually need? They want to change something. They don't think that this UX is the right one. So a few weeks later, a few months later, we come back, we sit down, we do these changes, then they deploy it, right? Obviously, larger clients prefer to work with these like maintenance and support packages that we provide, because that's usually how traditional agencies work, while smaller businesses don't, and they would rather have like a fixed cost, and then we go back, scope out version 2, update our wireframes, etc., build them and deploy it, and we did like the versioning setup.
That is something I want to ask you about after another segment. So I do want to talk to you about how you're structuring for recurring revenue. So don't let me forget that. I'm going to circle back to that.
So no, I mean, if you want to get, because those are the 7 phases of our process.
My question to you would be, like, when you started growing your agency, you started first you started building apps, then you started building your agency. Like, when did you know it was time to start hiring team members? And the second part to that question is, how did you know which team member, what role you needed?
So at the beginning, obviously our first hire was a developer. Probably our first 3 hires were developers. And then our next hire was a project manager, right? And then probably a designer. And now that we had the trifecta, project manager, developer, designer, we started adding like those packages, right? So right now, today, we have 3 project managers, a couple of business analysts, probably we have 4 designers, and a lot of developers. I mean, at the end, it's like, how do I know when to hire? Right now, I'm hiring all the time, but back then, when I'm too overwhelmed, I live my life completely overwhelmed, but then when I can't handle it more, I'm like, we got to hire someone.
What are you looking for when you're hiring team members? What is there something specific you're looking for in a person to join your agency?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're hiring a designer, if we're hiring a UX designer, we want experience in UX, right? If we're hiring a Glide developer, we need the best Glide developers in our team. If we're hiring another type of developer for another platform, so expertise, experience today is something like very important, especially for the type of projects that we're building. Like, we're working with really large companies, so they expect very high level of service, very high level of expertise. So our teammates need to represent that, which is like our brand, right? Something that is consistent though throughout all of our team members in terms of what I'm looking for is there's this concept, it's on Twitter, called the permissionless apprenticeship, right? So I have had cases, which means that basically people have to do stuff. Like, I can post a job somewhere on LinkedIn and get whatever 50 applicants. But then if someone goes the next step, a step further, and then they reach out and maybe I have had cases, and I've hired a lot of people where hiring a Glide developer, and they're like, oh, I saw that you did this video where you were showcasing this app. I redid that app and added the AI component. I'm like, wow, okay, you went a step further. Like, that's very valuable. And right now I have had people who have reached out multiple times looking for a job. Right now, we just hired a guy last week. He reached out a couple years ago, and I'm like, I mean, you're learning, but you're not there yet. He kept learning, and now he is like really, really good. And we just hired him, last week or something. So we want people who want to keep learning, because specifically with software, with no code, with Glide, etc., all of the tools that we're using are evolving very fast. So we need someone who is not like let's say a typical senior developer who has done things a certain way, and that's like, he's a COBOL developer, and COBOL probably hasn't evolved in years, compared to, you need to learn now AI, you need to learn JavaScript now in Glide, you need to, right? So we want people, and the let's say, talking specifically about developers, are developers who really shine, who are the BCS, who makes the most money, who take the most challenging projects, are the developers who want to keep learning and keep learning. And now they got to learn JavaScript, they learn. And then they got to learn how to prompt, and they do that, right? So that's very important. And that not only applies to developers, but also applies to, I don't know, our designers, right? Like, you have to be up to date in terms of what are the up-and-coming design trends, the new Glide components, how they work, how can you use a custom component in Glide to build something, right? So I would say that is like something consistent throughout the whole team.
I want to talk about recurring revenue, but before we jump, is this just part of your culture to keep your team highly engaged with growing themselves, staying sharp, leveling up their skill sets? Or do you actually encourage certain things for your team to stay up to date? It's a cultural thing, but also is there practical things that you give them? I'm just curious.
Yeah, both. It's a cultural thing, and then we do have like a quarterly budget for like continuous education, so people can spend, if I'm not mistaken, like $500 each every quarter on courses related to their field. So a developer, let's say our Glide developers, ideally should be spending money and time learning JavaScript or whatever. Or our designers should be spending money and time, our money, their time on learning whatever, UX, UI, etc. So that is something. And at the same time, we also have certain requirements. In order for us to hire a Glide developer, level 3 certified. in order for us to hire a Bubble developer, Bubble certified, or same for the other tools, right? So we do have some requirements, like hard requirements, but we do expect, and of course there are people who don't like that, right? But at the end, people who keep learning, they will shine, they will grow, and people who don't stay here and eventually they fizzle out. Or we always need more, right? There are more competitors, there are more Glide agencies, there are more agencies joining Glide. So I'm very proud to say that we have been around the longest. We've made the most amount of apps. We're the largest and leading Glide agency. If we want to stay that way, we gotta keep on learning and doing great stuff and having the best people in the team every single day.
Yeah, you've probably got a few hot on your trail. There's a lot of great up and comers, and it's really exciting to see the camaraderie and the partnerships between agencies and experts wanting to see each other grow. It's truly spectacular. There's a lot of businesses that haven't quite discovered the power yet, and it's impressive to me. So I want to jump into recurring revenue, and then for the remainder of the event, I've got a whole bunch of questions. This has been really amazing. Is there any advice you would want to give freelancers that are looking to start an agency, or people who have just started an agency and they're looking to grow? Are there any parting pieces of wisdom you'd like to bestow upon others?
You have to share your learnings. So just like back then, the community forum, I told you 20 people, I answered every single post. There are multiple ways to do the same nowadays. And maybe it's not the community forum, it's maybe your community, maybe it's your local community, maybe it's talking about how you can build an app for free for your friend, for your whatever, right? So sharing what you know is a great way to get leads, I would say.
I love that. We're really out of time. I want to ask everybody real quick if this was helpful for y'all. I'm going to drop a poll in. I hope this has been great for y'all and y'all have enjoyed this. And if you haven't yet, if you haven't started a software development agency with Glide, you absolutely should. And if you are building and you're not in the Glide Experts program, you absolutely should be. It is. Oh, I had a pop up. It's where you should be. I've really enjoyed this. Jesus, how can people get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
So you can go to lowcode.agency. I'm going to pop it up here on the screen. You can follow us on Twitter, now X. There are a bunch of YouTube videos. There's our QR code, lowcode.agency. That's our website.
I love it. So again, this is recorded. This will be available for everybody to watch afterwards. We'll send a link and you can watch the parts that you missed. Some of the other Q&As we'll probably do a circle back with you. This has been extremely valuable.
Of course.
Thanks, everybody.